This is episode 73 of Our Modern Heritage, the Home and Family Culture podcast, and I'm your host, Jody Chathy. I'm really excited about this episode to talk with Alex because I had a great conversation with him after he shared his experience in my church about his life-changing choices that he made as a young man. He started out as a world champion dancer and felt like that lifestyle wasn't serving him anymore, so he decided to make some changes. So you're going to hear about his experience and also how he has learned to understand how to cultivate a vision with his family and what the meaning of legacy is for him. So thank you for listening. I appreciate you listening. You can check out my show notes for this and every episode at homeandfamilyculture.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at Family Culture Podcast. So I've got Alex Gomez on the episode today, and Alex was born and raised in Oklahoma City, and he moved to Salt Lake City, where he started professionally dancing. He placed third in the Salsa World Championship in 2012, and then he started a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to Cali, Colombia, and now he lives in Virginia with his wife and 3-month-old son. And I asked Alex to come on the show with me today because I go to church with Alex, and he gave a talk. And he talked about his experience of actually giving up his career in dancing so that he could prepare and go on to serve a mission. And then I'll have Alex share the rest about what he went through and his experiences for making those changes that he went through in his life. Because I felt really strongly that his story really represented to me what it takes when we want to have an intentional family culture and make intentional changes in our life to be able to go through that, to make those changes for the better. So everybody welcome Alex to the show. Thanks for being here, Alex.
Well, thank you for having me. So yeah, I grew up in a very family-centered home, and that really helped me to be able to just have that strong foundation. But I started professionally dancing, and that was kind of a wicked world where I lost sight of those things and lost sight of what was important in my life, and just kind of got really into worldly things. And I had an experience that really changed me, or really helped me be able to make the first step to change. Well, several experiences actually, and I'll be quick with them. I actually didn't share them all, so Jody, this will probably be the first time you've heard them as well. But I was visiting my grandfather's grave in Colombia. And while I was there, I felt his presence, and I felt him tell me that I needed to change my life around. And that was a pretty powerful moment. But I was so stuck in my ways, in the worldly ways, and I loved what I was doing. I had achieved my life dream, so I thought, of being a professional dancer and making a living out of it and traveling. And so I got home, and I kind of stayed in my ways for several months. And then one day I was working, and I would work really late nights. So it was a late night, and I was still in my ways, and I all of a sudden had this like epiphany, and I saw this panorama of my life, and the way I was living it in the moment, from start to end, how miserable my life was and how sad, and I could feel every moment as it would go through my life was if I would have kept living it the way I was. And then I had another panorama if I changed my life around like my grandpa told me to, and what my life would look like. And I started reflecting back on, okay, what is it exactly that I need to change? And I started reflecting on in that panorama, when were the happiest times? And those happiest times were when I was home with my family, and I was living those values and principles that were taught to me at a very young age. So then I decided, okay, the first step is, even though I was very reluctant, the first step was, all right, I know I figured out what it was I needed to do. So I needed to go back to church was the first step. So I went back to church, and I pulled out my tie and suit that I hadn't worn in years. And forgot how to iron. But I went to church, and it was really awkward, and it was really weird at first. And I wasn't having it because it just wasn't natural anymore. But I knew that's what I needed to do. So I stuck to it. I went again the next time, and it felt better, and it felt a little bit more normal. And I went again the next time, and slowly it started feeling right. And I think that's the hardest thing about change in one's life is we know we need to do it, and then we expect it to happen immediately. And that's never the case. Changing is a long process. I like to think of it as an egg and a chicken. The egg is hatched, and we see the egg sit there, and all of a sudden it hatches, and it's like, wow, now there's a chicken. Amazing, right? But we don't realize, and we don't see the process that the chicken goes through to develop within the egg. And if we expect to just hatch, then we're going to, be disappointed because it doesn't work that way. So I had to really fight through it. I had my old lifestyle, my ways, and really, just sticking to it and saying, all right, I know what I need to do. I just got to be consistent in making it happen. And I slowly started praying again. And my first prayers were really awkward. I didn't feel like I connected with God at all. But slowly it started feeling more natural, and I started feeling that connection. And that's the key. That's really what helped me. It wasn't a fast process. It was long, and it's still happening. I still have to reflect on my life, every day. And what am I doing to achieve my goals? Something I do now with my family, with my wife. Before we got married, we set 60-year goals, where we wanted to be within 60 years. And then we worked backwards from that. So then we said, all right, 50 years. Where do we have to be in 50 years to reach our 60-year goal? And we went all the way back till year one. And what we do is we sit down with each other, and then we'll evaluate, okay, where are we at? How are we doing to make sure we accomplish our 60-year goal, which is essentially where we want to be and who we want to be by the time we reach old age, assuming that we live that long. And that has helped us so much to be able to reflect back on those goals and kind of have like an inventory of all right, where are we at? How are we doing? And what do we need to do to achieve it? And sometimes you reach the goals faster. So then you got to do some reevaluating. Okay, what else can I do? Right. Or sometimes you don't reach them. So then you say, all right, how do I expedite this so that I can make it happen? And it's a process. And that's the key. If anybody takes anything out of this, is that don't get discouraged when you try to change and it doesn't happen immediately, because it won't. You have to keep fighting constantly your whole life. And little by little, that change of nature will happen. So, that's my story briefly.
I love that. I took so much. I'm like writing notes, and I rarely write notes during an interview because I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much I'm getting out of this story that, first of all, that, you remembered the things that your parents taught you when you're growing up. And that's so important. When as a parent, you're thinking about like the things that we hope and pray that our kids learn and what they pick up on, and that sometimes it doesn't sink in until they're grown up. Right. but wow, what a that because your parents had, those values, and they taught them in your home, that allowed you to have something to fall back on and remember. So like, what were some of the things that you remember them teaching that came to your mind?
More than things that taught, it was the feeling. It was the overall feeling of being home, of growing up in that spirit of love and happiness and joy. And that's what I remembered. And then after that, remembering that feeling, then I thought, what created that feeling? And that's when I started really having to dig deep and try to really analyze what were those things. And that's when I realized, well, it was because my had family prayers, and we were united, and we went out and we did things together. And my parents were involved in my life, and we would read the scriptures together. And, I think parents sometimes get caught up on, I want my kids to learn these principles. And yes, it's important to teach them, but really it's the environment that's created from teaching those principles and from living the principles. And if you can create that environment, that sticks with all of us, I think. And then, like in my case, you reflect back and you realize, oh, that's why we prayed. That's why we read. Didn't understand it in the moment, and nothing stuck. I couldn't tell you a scripture we read or what I learned from it, but I knew it was those things that created that environment.
That's so important. I actually did have an interview where my guest had talked about like that culture. He had compared culture to like when you want to grow something, that like a culture of like, fermentation of like, good kinds of bacteria or things like that you just have to establish the right environment, and then that allows those good things to cultivate. And so that's such a good point, because I think that a lot of times, we do get caught up in like the checklists or the logistics of like, you need to do this and that. And then sometimes that almost dominates and like detracts from the feeling that we're trying to establish in our family. But that's sad. That's too bad that sometimes it's like, we think that the checklists and things are more important, or the events that we want to do are more important than what we're becoming, and lose sight of the vision that we really have. And so that was another thing that you talked about, was that you and your wife have that vision of going forward 60 years, 50 years, 40 years, 30, 20. And that's, when I reflect back on my story, and, I'm going through a series where I'm actually talking on my podcast about what went wrong when my husband and I got started out, because we got our relationship right. We got our values right, but we didn't have a vision. We had no idea what we were doing. And that would have made such a big difference, because, we started going to school going, I don't know what to study. I don't know what skills I have. I don't really know what to do. And so we kind of floundered, but having that vision would have been such a big deal, because we would have been able to establish a plan. Like you said, you have goals that you guys are working towards in order to reach that vision. And that's a really big part of having an intentional family culture. So, but then I want to talk about this idea of changing, because I think that an analogy of the chicken and the egg is really interesting, because, that's one of those things like in those adversity posters, that are like with the chicken, like if you crack an egg from the outside, then that kills the chicken. But if they crack it from the inside, even though it takes a lot of work and it's hard, then they live and they're born, and so that I really appreciated that perspective of going through change. So like what particular things in your vision or in that epiphany sustained you through the changes that you wanted to make?
I knew I wanted a family, and I knew that, what I saw is if I kept professionally dancing, that I wouldn't be able to sustain a happy family. I was working late nights. I was traveling every weekend. People take dance lessons in the evening, so I wouldn't be home when my family would be home and my kids would be home. So that was one of them, was that deep desire to have a family. And then the second one was progression. I saw my life kind of halt, kind of got stopped up. I was the youngest person to be a world champion, so to say. I kind of had reached the maximum, I guess you could say. And I thought, now what? Like, where's my life going? What do I have to look forward to? And I didn't have anything to look forward to, because I had reached what I thought was it. So then seeing that I could progress a lot more by getting married and starting a family and and, growing in a different profession and different interests I had. That's really what I remember. And that feeling, wanting to have that feeling that I talked about, that I had in my household, in my home growing up, those things are really what rooted me to every time I would fail, and I failed a lot and I still fail a lot. Those are the things that I remember to pick myself back up and to keep trying.
I love that, because it really does come back to, again, this idea of having a strong vision and how crucial that really is. That, I just finished reading this book, Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And he talks about that. Like, it's so good. It's such a good book. But, he talks about, like, when you have a clear why, then it actually defines the choices that you make along the way. Because you're like, does this thing that's trying to pull me that way, does it fit with my why? No, then I'm not going to go that way. Or if it does, then, hey, this serves me. This serves my why. This serves my vision. And so it's just that crucial to have that. And like right now with my family, I'm just like, I have a really strong vision of like where I'm going with like my podcast and my brand and all this kind of stuff. And it's not easy. Like, there are so many ups and downs of trying to figure all this stuff out. But because I have that vision, then I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to roll with the punches, and just figure out what, whatever comes my way. Then it's really designed to make me stronger, so I can learn something from this and overcome these hurdles instead of allow them to make me quit, because if I just quit, then I'm not going to reach those goals and that vision and stuff like that. So awesome. That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing your story, Alex. I really appreciate it. And just like in conclusion, I wanted to ask you, I brought this up, I gave you time to think about it. Well, so I want to share this quote from a talk that I sent you, and I was reading it this morning, and I just thought this fits so well with our conversation and listening to your talk and your experience. And it's from a general conference address from in October 2018, and it's called "Now Is the Time." And it's about, this guy talking. He's like, he found out that he had an acute heart problem, and that the doctor was just like, not many people survive from this. And so if there's anything in your life that you need to evaluate, then do it now. And so all this stuff like started flooding into his mind, like, I wasn't expecting to have to do this now, And so I just want to share this quote that he says about assessing our lives. And he says, "We live in a world of information overload, dominated by ever-increasing distractions that make it more and more difficult to sort through the commotion of this life and focus on things of eternal worth. Our daily lives are bombarded with attention-grabbing headlines served up by rapidly changing technologies. Unless we take the time to reflect, we may not realize the impact of this fast-paced environment on our daily lives and the choices we make. We may find our lives consumed with the bursts of information packaged in memes, videos, and glaring headlines. Although interesting and entertaining, most of these have little to do with our eternal progress, and yet they shape the way we view our mortal experience." I just thought that was really interesting, the fact that there's so many ways that the world can be so distracting. And yet, if we get to the end of our lives and we go, what was that even for? Like, what was the point? I spent my whole life being distracted. And so I wanted to ask you, based on, what you've gone through, your experience, and now hearing about the vision that you've even been able to cultivate, unless you go through an experience like you did, I don't know that like some people really honestly start to think about it unless they feel like they have to start thinking about it. And it's like, I don't want to wait until I'm on my deathbed going, oh no, what did I do with my life? And so I wanted to ask you, what does legacy mean to you? And, what have you learned from your experience that has shaped your view of what legacy means?
Yeah, definitely. Before I get into legacy, I want to touch on a point you just said, with being distracted. We can be the best people in the world. We can have the best intentions and yet still get distracted. We can all get distracted. It reminds me of playing in the ocean you set up your spot and you go play in the ocean, and you're playing, and the current slowly takes you down. And next thing you realize, you look back up at the beach and you don't see your spot, and it's a mile down, right? And you didn't even realize it. And I think it's so important that we're always looking back to our spot constantly. It doesn't matter how good we are. And it talks about a talk from Elder Oaks about, sometimes you got to replace good things with better things. We're never good enough, right? We can always be better. And that's what progression's about. And that's what's so beautiful about this life, is that we can always keep progressing. But the only way we can do that is if we're looking back and we're reflecting on that vision, on that goal, which can change. But the key is that we're always reflecting and going back to that. So I just wanted to say that, because it's so crucial to.
Yeah, I love that thought. Thank you for sharing.
And then with legacy, I'll never forget on my mission. I was really close with my mission president. I served with him for 9 months in the office. So we became really good friends. And I'll never forget one time, I think I got a little cocky, a little prideful because of the position I was in. And he sat me down and he said, what's success? What's success to you? What makes you a successful missionary? And I started saying, baptisms, converting people to Jesus Christ. And I started saying all these things, and he would say no. And he kept asking, what's successful? That's not it. What is it? And I came up with every missionary answer I could come up with. And he said, he was a very stern person and very cold, but it was good for me. And he said, Elder, you're not a good missionary. And I said, well, then what do I need to do to become a good missionary? And he said, well, you won't know if you're a good missionary until your kids go on a mission. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, all the actions that you do now and all the things that you do now are all for the purpose of a family. And your true success will be, can you live these things after you get home? Can you teach these things to your family? Can you leave that legacy to your kids? And that stabbed me right through the heart, because I was living very much in the moment. And I think, so when I think of legacy, I think, what am I doing today to impact somebody else? In my case right now, I'm really focused on my family. When I was single, I would focus on, okay, what am I going to do to leave an impact on the people around me today? And then also reflecting on my 50-year, 60-year goal. What am I doing today to make sure that that legacy is left? And I don't want people to remember me, so to say. I want people to remember the things that I was able to, the principles and values I was able to leave behind to my family. And I want for generations for that to be pushed down. So that's, I don't know, that's when I think of legacy, like in my own life and the legacy that I want to leave behind, it's not so much about me as it is, what am I doing to create, like we were talking about, that environment that's necessary so that my kids can pass on this happiness to their kids, and that can keep going on for generations. So that's it for me.
That's perfect. I think that's exactly, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate your thoughts. I appreciate your sharing your experience, and that you were willing to share this whole story at church, and it impacted me. And I just thought, I know that this story would impact so many more people in hearing your encouragement, hearing your, what you've been through. And it really speaks to my message about family culture, that, having that vision, having those values that you're working on and the goals, and holding on to that vision, keep looking back at the shore so that you don't get lost, you don't get distracted. So I love that analogy. That was awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Alex. I really appreciate having you on the show. And usually I conclude by asking how we can connect with you, but I don't know if you want my audience. You want random people friend requesting you or something. You'll be like,
I'm a friendly person.
they'll be like, I heard you on Jody's podcast. So no, but no, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and being willing to come on my podcast. And I appreciate it. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
And that was so awesome. I'm just so excited that Alex was willing to come on the show to talk about his experiences and just that insight about legacy and about, retaining a vision for where you're going. Just so awesome. So great insights. And I'm so grateful to be able to share this with you guys. And so I want to know from you, what impact this episode has had on you and the ideas, if it helped to generate some ideas about why it's important for your family to have a vision, or if there's anything in your family culture that you just think, I think we need to change this, and how this episode inspired you to make changes and to evaluate the legacy that you have, that you're leaving behind. Are you living a life that you'll be proud of if, when you're gone and your children and grandchildren remember you? What are they going to say about you? What impact have you made on the people around you? And so that's part of my mission is learning about these things. What is the vision that we have for our lives and the legacy that we're going to leave behind because of our family culture, because of, the service and just the lives that we choose to live. And I appreciate Alex's example because, he saw that the life he was living really wasn't making an impact on a bigger scale. And I mean, he still does some dancing work, but he has made these changes because he wanted to make a more significant impact, and he wanted to be able to live the kind of life that his children and grandchildren be proud of. And so I really admire that about him and his example and his story and the things that he shared. So please come on to my Instagram page and message me. I'm at Family Culture Podcast, and I'd love to hear, how this episode has impacted you and any ideas that it spurred in you, ways that you want to change or make changes or the things that you want to do to make an impact on your family and on your circle of influence, the sphere of people that you can have an influence on. And so I'd love to hear about that. Again, you can subscribe on my website at homeandfamilyculture.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at Family Culture Podcast. And I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook page at Family Culture Podcast, and on Twitter at _Family Culture. Just remember that Mother Teresa said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family.